Terrence, your condo looks different.
Yeah, upgraded.
And we are streaming live at this time, just so everyone knows.
Will you make me co-host, please? Thank you. Good morning, Commissioner Fuentes.
Morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning.
Hey, Terrence.
Yes.
Last week I had a meeting with Ricky Santiago, and he told me that he met with you and was a good meeting.
Yeah, we talked about you for a while. He's great. We had some conversations about some things that we might be able to do together. So
Glad to know that, man.
you scared me with your van the other day.
Yeah, I remember.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What is it? When does the state fair start? Has it started or is it next week?
Starts either today or yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, it starts in 1 minute, just started.
Oh, 1 minute. Does the commission have a table there? Are they doing anything to set up? Or no, you don't know? Or education, are they set up this year?
I was actually going to ask Marianne about that, but I know at some point they weren't letting us. Sorry, people are joining the wrong meeting right now. I'm trying to do that as well.
Who is the telephone, the 859 number? Is it one of our commissioners?
The Lexington area.
I wondered if it was, and then there they are.
It's probably either Jim Glenn or.
He's
John.
270.
Okay,
70.
then it's John Fisher.
Are some of the people joining the teams things rather than the Zoom? Because both of them were in the email that was sent.
Brandon is in the teams to let people know if anyone is in there. There we go. There's everybody.
Hey, Marianne, you should send us your virtual background. I like the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights. I can download it on my computer. Use it for this meeting.
Will do.
Thanks. Hope you're doing well, Marianne.
Okay, let me, by my count, I think we do have a quorum. So let me call this August the 18th, 2022 meeting of the Kentucky Commission on Human Rights to order. Terrence, can you confirm that my count on that we do have a quorum? We got 6 commissioners on now.
We do have a quorum.
Okay. As well as the confirmation of a public notice.
And public notice was sent.
Are there any requests for public participation today?
There's no request. Someone had reached out, but they never followed up, so I don't see them.
Okay. So let's move on to the approval of the minutes. And in approving the minutes, we need to do 2 things. Because we did not have a quorum at the June meeting, the minutes from the May meeting need to be approved. So can I have a motion to approve first the minutes of the May 19, 2022 meeting?
I would like to make a motion to approve the May 22 meeting minutes.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the minutes of the May 19, 22 meeting be approved. All those in favor, signify by saying aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? Any opposition? Those minutes are approved. Next, we move to the approval of the minutes from the June 23rd meeting. There are minutes of it, even though we did not have a quorum present. Those were circulated to you. And I guess before I ask for a motion to approve those, Terrence, there I guess several things in there. First of all, those minutes have our vice chair not in attendance, but also chairing the meeting, which did not occur. So that's at least one change that needs to be, or a correction needs to be made. Are there any others that anyone has? Okay, hearing none, can I have a motion to approve those minutes as with the one correction? Moved by Commissioner Cheney, there's second.
Second.
Second by Rabbi Littman. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposition? Those minutes are approved. So we next go to our section report. Go to our section reports, and first up is the executive director's report.
Morning, everybody. I do have someone who is possibly joining to share some about an event that I was going to discuss with you all. Commissioner Fuentes briefly mentioned it, and I'll circle back, but they got called into a meeting, and so they may be joining. If not, I've set up the presentation to where I can do that if needed. And Brandon, you'll have to watch the people coming in because I'm going to be sharing my screen. Okay. So I wanted to go through, this one will be a little bit longer than normal. I have a couple things I wanted to bring you up to speed on and just run through. And if you have questions, we can go through it. But some of the things that we talked about, the air conditioner, some of the things that we've done internally, and then some of the work that we've been doing. Did want to, I don't know if they're on, Joe, but I did want to welcome our law students for the semester. Megan, Chadwick, and Lauren, they're all 3 Ls at U of L. And so they'll be helping mostly the legal unit and doing some of our case prep and research. Just as a follow-up on the air conditioning, all of the units have been installed now. We have one thing that they need to get fixed. So the finishing touches are being done. Some of them aren't blowing cold air yet, but they are all new units. And so now it's just making sure that they're all working. But that's been handled. So thankfully they were able to get it done in the time that they said. And I talked to the chair about our meeting options today, and as of the other day, we didn't have a ceiling in the commission meeting room, so that wouldn't have worked out. We do have a ceiling now with all the units being in, but now they're just making sure they're working properly. I worked with the legal unit to finalize our new SOPs. It basically was restating some of the work that we've been doing, but some modifications and clarifications on some of the practices, especially with now having, at least by state standards, our fully staffed legal unit, being able to really line up what some of the practices are supposed to be and how we can make them work better, and reflecting who was responsible for what parts of the process, because sometimes that was a little confusing in some of the past practices. So making sure we clarified that for more work to improve our work moving forward, and worked with Joe and legal on rewriting all of those. And then next week we'll start working with Marianne to work on those SOPs next week. I did want to do a big thank you, especially to the legal unit. We talked before about some of the changes that we were making in the legal unit and doing some of the work. And Joe will cover this later, but the amicus brief practice is something that's new, but it's really exciting, and it's really putting the agency out there and getting us more in line with some of the things we were supposed to be doing initially and that we had kind of gotten away from. And so we've done a lot of good movement on case processing, but also in expanding some of the purview of the commission. And that also was reflected in some of the numbers that I wanted to go through with you a little bit more. I shared in the book, the fair housing book that I put together. This was supposed to be the event that I mentioned to you all in April and May, but due to COVID, we had to reschedule a couple times. And then we ended up did some interviews with leaders around the state and areas that looked at fair housing issues according to race and for sexual orientation and identity. And so we talked to leaders in those areas and then sent this around to all the local commissions and some of our partners. And then they're also sharing them with their networks. And so it's something this was part of that HUD partnership grant. This is what was requested of us to do, either a meeting or some type of book. And so this is what we did. And then this is the bigger part of what I wanted to go through with you all, just because there were some questions at the last meeting about some of I don't want to say confusion. It's just sometimes very complicated to figure out how some of these contracts and really the contracts and some of the ways that the payment works and what the fiscal years are. And so I wanted to go back to, this was in the training or the onboarding for commissioners, but that was so long ago. It's easy to, if you're not in it every day, to really remember how some of these work. And so HUD, our contract year ends on June 30th. However, we have a month in July for what's called the reconciliation period. And so why it seems confusing, while we were saying, okay, we've met this contract, but then we'll say we didn't meet a contract, is we have 2 lines of review with HUD, and our initial line of review approves our cases. However, their boss can go back and rescind approval and ask for more documentation or what have you. And so in that period of reconciliation, we then get time to correct whatever deficiencies, if possible, because some of them, they do a blanket denial where we can't fix it. But for the ones that we are able to fix, we have that month through August or through the end of July to go back and address. And so the way that it worked this past contract period is they sent back 8 cases that they had rejected and basically wanted completely new documentation, a re-review of the case files, and uploading and going through some of the process over again to meet their standards. And we were beyond at risk of not meeting our contract, which would put our position in the program in jeopardy. I went through each of the cases. I started to upload a picture of what my desk looked like because it was all of those cases stacked up. And I went through all of them, reached out to some people, uploaded the documentation that was needed, and then we got those approved for this contract period to make us meet exactly the contract. We were one over initially, but we ended up being right at it after we went through all the reconciliation process. But that's why it does seem a little confusing is in April, we might be surpassing the contract, but then I'll hear back in my Friday meeting, because I have a meeting with them on Fridays, that they decided to reject 6 of them. So then we're behind again. And so that's why it may seem like we're always in this back and forth of we're meeting it. No, we're not. And so if there are any questions on that, I can cover that, but that's how HUD works. EEOC is September 30th. And
Terrence, before you jump to that one, it may be good when you report it for the month when there have been cases rejected to provide that information as a part of the process. So as a way of tracking it. So if you may have said we met it this month, and you can include in the report that we get that there was X number of cases rejected and therefore this is where we are. Just a pathway to walk through to understand what's going on.
Okay, I'll do that. Hopefully none get rejected, but I will do that. EEOC is a little different. They're less hands-on in what we're doing in the work. And that's September 30th. However, that will change after this September. And so there will be some changes that we'll have to make sure that we meet those. And then the state fiscal year, that's what we operate on for our own internal purposes. And so all of those are different time periods. And sometimes it makes it a little complicated to try to get some things organized and understood. And so it may seem a little out of whack in how these are discussed. I also wanted to go through really briefly the process again of how some of these work. We have specific, and this is the process that's on the screen, is how the HUD payment process works. Just reiterating that there are different points throughout the process where we are eligible for payment, but we don't get that payment as soon as we say, oh, we are doing this. We have at the end of a year where they'll review all the documentation that proves that we have done work that requires a specific payment point. So once we accept a case just to even investigate it, that's one payment point. So we have to have documentation in the system in June that we had this part of this case completed. And then after there's a probable cause determination or a no probable cause determination, doesn't matter which, but once we have the documentation in there in June, that's when it's decided, okay, we can also get that amount, that agreed to contract amount for that action. The other time is what's called supplemental payment, and that's after a determination has been made if we do some type of triggering event, which would be an administrative hearing being filed or scheduled, or if we have a court filing. And so those are separate, but those also are considered triggering events that are supplemental payment that's also reviewed again after June 30th. And so all the work has to be put into the federal system. And then during that, between the end of June and the end of July is when they review each of those steps of the documentation to see if we've done it all. And so that's when ultimately the cases will be decided on full payment or if they're rejected or whatever. And so that's what, if I'm told, okay, on this case, you didn't have all the proper documentation to show that you made a probable cause determination, or there's something that didn't have my signature for closure, then I'll have to go back and find that and upload it and do all of that. So does that make sense? It's not where we get paid whenever we do something. It's just all done in that reconciliation period where they then determine payment amounts. So speaking of that and the HUD budgeting, I just wanted to share this we're having a good year with, as far as HUD budget. Our case processing from all that documentation that we did put in and the cases that were closed in the past year, we will be getting, it's still in the, I haven't gotten the final, but this is an approximation. It shouldn't deviate more than like $2,000. The case processing is around $95,000 for the year, which is pretty average based on our contract requirement of 40 cases for the year. But on top of that, we are now going to get an extra 70,000, which was, I mentioned that this was something I was going to be looking into, going back and going through some of our cases that had been done in the past, but the documentation wasn't handled properly. So things before I got here, and finding that old documentation or putting some things together to request payment. And so we'll be getting an extra 70,000 whenever we voucher for that money once it's finalized. And then a very new thing is we're also getting what's called special enforcement effort funds, or C funds. And initially we were going to get $5,000, but I worked with our HUD person and we're going to get up to 30,000. And this is for restricted expenses that would help in the enforcement of our cases. But what that means is anything that helps the legal unit. So post cause actions. And so this will can be used to bring people in to help, or the big push is getting technology that would help move things forward. So we're working on, we've already identified the expenses for this. We're also going to get some assistance in prep for some of our upcoming housing cases, where we'll have some experienced housing attorneys come and work with case prep, trial prep, and doing all of that before we have a couple cases that are going to be in court. Joe has identified some ways that we can use that, and then he and Colt and Sana will be beneficiaries of that, and we'll get some institutional knowledge on how we can better serve the people who are using us in court. So that was, if you had any questions about that, I just wanted to make sure you all saw where that was coming from. And I thought giving an explanation of how that process works ahead of time would make it where it was a little bit easier to ask questions. But that 95,000 comes from that review period between June and July. And then I'm really excited about the C funds, because there are a couple things that we needed to do on the legal side that will make us a little bit more effective moving forward. And so being able to get that extra $30,000 is really helpful. We talked about this before, and this was brought up by Vice Chair Smith to look at some of those issues within the jail. And I mentioned to you all about the advisory group that was being pulled together to look at disparities and some possible solutions. And one thing that I did want to share with you all is we had a few meetings now. There were some smaller subcommittees that were created out of that. And one of the things that we thought would be really beneficial would be to put together a large symposium or event talking about best practices, looking at disparities, and work through how we can do something. And so I worked with Dr. Laterman, who was the new psychologist at the jail. And we were able to bring in over 100 community leaders to have conversations and talk about some of the issues and look at ways that we could use what was gathered to then spearhead conversations and solutions with the advisory committee. And what we've decided we're going to do, actually, I'll share that at the end of this. I'm checking the participants to see if Dr. Laterman's on. Okay, I'll just run through it. If she joins, then we can circle back. But over 50 groups were represented, and they came from around the country. So it was people talking about best practices and how to identify disparities and issues and things that they've done. And we had people from pretty much all over the country doing this. And so I put together this board to have at the entry and up by the podium, just showing all the different groups that were committed to doing some of that work and who came. It was attended also by local leaders. We had some state representatives. We had some Louisville Metro Council members, and it was the mayor of Louisville opened it with me and Dr. Lederman. This is the mayor talking to a man named Roe, who runs a nice organization in New York, who was formerly in prison, but now he works with youth, especially Black youth, on identifying ways to not go, finding ways to work within the community and to do different things, but empowering them to become leaders themselves. And so it was really nice to have him here talking about things that he saw in New York and things that they implemented that were successful there and how we can do it here. This is us, me and Dr. Lederman opening the event and talking about, why we're here. In the picture also is basically the chief of staff to the mayor and the jail director, who were all in attendance. And then what we did was I'll run through a little bit of the day, but we had panel discussions with people who were very previously incarcerated, people who were doing different types of work. This picture here is our keynote, Dr. Vaz, who does justice reform work across the world. And so she was speaking to the group it was really done as a panel about some of the things that she's done and some of the efforts that she's championed around the world based on best practices and the research that she's seen on how we can stop or address some of the issues that we see in jailing and police and all of that. This is another panel that we had. These are all formerly incarcerated people who were talking about some of the things that they were working on to create more community involvement and engagement, and showing how you can work within a system, even though there may be some mistrust of a system, but you can work within that system to do change, and how you can have self-driven advocacy and how to collaborate with other leaders and other systems and leverage the resources that do exist. And so these are people some are from Chicago, New York, and I think those were the ones that were on this panel. But it was a really good conversation. We had people, it was interactive, not just them talking, but everyone there was able to ask questions to these different groups. And then one of the bigger hits of the program was we did a conversation before and after and during with people who are currently in jail in Louisville. And they're part of the Chance for Change program, where it's basically like a leadership and accountability program where they're learning things that they can do when they leave. And we were able to talk to them directly about some of their needs and things that they feel would be more effective in changing practices outside and inside of the jails. And so what you see in this picture is we did a live Zoom feed where we were able to talk back and forth through microphones and Zoom and all of that to talk with people while they were there. We also went the day before and met with some of them. And then we went the day after and met with the women who were in the same program in a different wing of the jail. But it was we learned a lot about things that we can do to improve some of the situations, especially there are a lot that are specific to women that are not being addressed. And so as a an institution looking at ways to address disparities really need to do a lot more to help women who are in jail. And so the whole concept was, we started by asking people about events and their own justice system involvement. And we had them write about themes and things that they saw on sticky notes that were placed around the room. You probably saw in the different pictures that there were random Post-its on the wall. So that's why it was trying to figure out why we were there and what we wanted to change. And so the first thing that we talked about after that was, we did, what are some options to not sentence people, just not sending people to jail all the time, alternative to sentencing. And what we learned there was, there's drug court, for example, is so effective and so helpful. But what we also learned, and this is something that we're taking, and we already have some ideas of things to suggest, but what we're learning is, a lot of the people who get drug court, which keeps you sometimes out of jail, but lets you get treatment, it's given to white offenders, especially white women, but other people aren't given that opportunity as often. And so we're going to work on ways to ease that disparity by looking at policy and practice solutions that can help get more people into drug court, which would then change some of that disparity racially in the jails. Because if we're diverting white people from going, but we're still not giving this opportunity to Black people, then that's a problem. And so we're looking at discussing ways on how we can make it where everyone who's eligible for drug court gets a review or some type of referral, or really just a review to get assessed to see if they're eligible, as opposed to select white offenders. And so that was the big thing that we got out of this first part of the program. I did talk about the keynote with Dr. Boz, who has done all of these. The green things are all links to documentaries that she's put together on issues around justice and things that she's seen around the world from her research. If you all are interested, I can share the links to all of these in a separate email after this meeting, but just wanted to share, she talked about things that she's seen in programs that were put in across the country, but then some of her work that she's done in other countries to see, like, what are some of the ways that other places were able to address not only the problems, but some of and I didn't know this, but it's even in other places in the world, the racial disparities still pop up. And so it's a lot of the same thing in different places. She said it a different way, but I can't say it like that in this meeting, but that was basically the sentiment. But that was one of the other big parts, was just talking through, okay, what has worked in other places to help? And so it was really good to have her perspective and her informed research and sharing some things that we can do. And then Commissioner Fuentes just talked about Ricky, but we had Ricky Santiago, who talked about the digital barrier that people face right now and how we can get people more involved and more connected, literally and figuratively, with the community by making the digital world not so unattainable, but teaching people digital skills, computer literacy, working with groups, especially, there are a lot of us that aren't exposed to this. And so being able to work with different groups to understand how computers work, how we can utilize technology for the betterment of all of us. And so it was really good to have Ricky's views on this. And I talked to Ricky afterwards. We're going to see about ways that we can work digital inclusivity into some of our work here, and expanding options and integration for other people. And something that came out of this conversation at the event was there was someone who had a lot of computers that they weren't using. And so we can possibly find some places that don't have access to computers and get them computers, but also have some training on how to use them with Ricky. And so that's something that I'm working on, and I'll follow up on that. But that was just a really good byproduct of this conversation. So overall, it was a really successful event. We've already had people reach out about us doing it again next year and even possibly expanding it. And if we can expand it for next year, I'd love to have everyone here included in how we do that. This was more streamlined because we had a buy-in from Dr. Boz to say that she had X date available. And so we just scheduled it around when she was available. But next year we'll have more time to plan it instead of 1 month. And we plan to have possibly 2 days instead of 1. And so, yeah, it was a really good event. And I learned a lot. And what we plan to do with that information is we're going to meet and talk through all the things that we learned, some of the issues that we can tackle, and bring that back to the advisory group. And what we'll be able to do and what the plan is to put together a policy packet. I can't remember the word we used. Joe might remember, but put together basically a policy packet, a recommendation to have for the local and state level to say, these are some of the things that we know would be helpful. And then we'll have those people in their different capacities also advocating for these policies and practice changes and all of that. So we'll be able to then present that to different people and try to make those things happen. And so that's something that I'm looking forward to, but that's all a byproduct of bringing in that initial advisory group that we talked about in, I think it was April. And so it's really exciting to see where that went from just that conversation then. And so just looking forward to doing more with that moving forward. So I will end with that. Does anyone have any questions about anything before we keep the meeting moving?
I just wanted to thank you, Executive Director, for following up with that discussion on that issue and the gravitas it is given to the consideration of best practices in other areas of the country. And hopefully the advisory group, in looking at the findings of this particular meeting, there are some things that we could discover as some actions come part to help move the needle between now and the event next year. But this is a tremendous, I appreciate very much the insights that have been gained and the resources that have become available through this opportunity. And obviously, we've known conceptually, but now we're seeing a lot more detail. And I see this really as a crisis point, that some immediate actions are necessary in order to provoke some change. So I hope that we could have a more aggressive discussion on this and see what we can tackle. And one of the things I think is important, there are pre-existing organizations that like the NAACP and the Ministerial Coalition and others that I also think need to be mobilized around this. Sometimes we start new efforts, and persons who have within their history some sensitivities and activities toward these types of issues don't get the opportunity to be mobilized. So I would hope that we could creatively find ways to reach the pre-existing capacities that are available in this city to tackle this issue with the jail. Thanks so much.
Any other questions on any of this?
Number one, I want to echo the chair. This is remarkable. I do have a question. We spoke before COVID, so 20, 30 years ago, about a program at UK. Is this of a similar kind, or is this different? So would this incorporate things like that, or is this differently entirely?
So this was differently entirely, but it was in the same or similar vein to what I wanted to do at UK. And then we
Because I
had,
could hear like glimpses of your vision for the last program in this, which is why.
right. Yeah, unfortunately, that whole thing with COVID and then hearing back from UK, we had to push it, but I still want to do that. And so hopefully we can get that done as now that they're back in school and we have a captive audience, so to speak.
Literally. Okay, very good. Thank you.
You have more, Terrence, or you finished?
That's all with mine.
Okay, let's take your. Okay, so that's the, any other questions for the executive director? Okay, hearing none, let's go to the budget and personnel. Brandon, are you on?
Yes, I am here. You have my report before you. In the narrative, it outlines the new budget that's in effect. Also comment that as of July 1st, all state employees received an 8% raise per the budget bill. And which is good considering, you know, there's been no raises in the past 6 years, and basically inflation has caused about a 23% loss in spending power. So that makes up for some of that. Also, I was recently elected to the Personnel Council as the secretary of board member. So I'll be representing the agency on the Personnel Council, not to be confused with the Personnel Board. It's a gathering of state HR employees. So hopefully I'll be able to better serve the agency and get more information that could make us more effective in our human resource endeavors. So if there are any questions, I'll field those at this time.
Any questions for Brandon? For any commissioners? Brandon, on your, I don't hear any, on your report, the columns, you got July 2022, the FY23 year to date, and then it's the FY22 year to date, our final for the FY22.
It is not. It is the year to date. It is July 1st, 2021 through July 31st, 2021, just to give us a comparison for how we're stacking up.
So right now we're projecting that we're going to be roughly $14,000 under budget.
That is correct. Well, the budget was increased, so that just gives us an example. But yes, we are projected right now to be slightly over budget. Some of that is due to a lump sum payout for a settlement. So I expect this to normalize, and I believe that depending on, we're hiring 2 positions. We have 2 positions open right now that we're hiring for. So depending on the timing and the salary for those positions, I think we're on course to break even with our budget.
So if it does go over budget, is there a plan in place how that funding will be covered?
Yes, so we have a surplus in federal cash, and we can request, and we expect to request an increase in our appropriation, and which it's, if it's due to federal money, they almost always grant those. We thought we were going to have to do that this year, but it turned out that that was not the case.
And it's really just asking to use the money that we've earned.
That's right.
It's not a new appropriation. It's just asking them to let us use more of it during this budget year.
Yeah, and you'll notice in the budget portion on the narrative, our federal funds were increased from 245,000, the appropriation, to 445,000, because we do have extra federal funds that we needed to spend down. Generally, we've been very protective of those in the past because it does give us that cushion, but we're at a point where,
So if you take out the federal funds, the state appropriation of general fund money increased or decreased?
it decreased. Yes, unfortunately, we were quite upset about that.
And decreased by how?
All right, I can give you an exact number. Terrence made a very good argument in the budget committee meeting, but it fell on deaf ears, unfortunately. Give me just a second, and I will tell you exactly how much it decreased. So last year it was $2,001,300. And this year it is 1,900,000 and 1,953,500. So it decreased by $47,800, the general fund.
Okay. Any other questions on the budget and or personnel?
And I will say, not to jump into your presentation too much, Brandon, but I did reach out to the budget review subcommittees to be on the agenda again for this summer during the interim. They let me know last week that they're looking for what month we'll be able to fit. And then as soon as I know, we'll be able to get on. We can put together another presentation, and then I can let you know when that is, and can go and have a team or a show of force to speak to why we need more and don't need to continuously be cut. But also, one of the things that's been difficult to express to them is the difference between, and this is something I ran into during the budget session this year, is seeing that federal appropriation. That's why I hate calling it that. I had quite a few legislators ask if we really needed any more money, since we were getting, in their eyes, they were appropriating more federal money to us, and not understanding that that was not really them giving us anything. But that is why they are still maintaining that we have not had any cuts, and we've had only increases. And so
Yeah, and I knew that was going to happen, but we had to increase our federal appropriation. I mean, it's unfortunate timing. And Terrence's basic argument, I'll give you the 10-second version. We're 88% payroll, about 12% operating costs. So we used to have 29 employees, let's say 12 years ago, and our budget has remained approximately the same. And now we have 17, 18 employees. Why is that? Well, the retirement contribution went up about 900% during that time. It went from about 6% to now the state contributes per employee about 85%. So we're basically, we doubled the payroll cost approximately for each employee, especially if you include insurance costs, health insurance, and didn't increase our funding. So we had to decrease our number of employees, and we're really short on bodies. It is getting to be a crisis situation, I would say. Especially since compared to the rest of the state, Louisville's salaries are more competitive, and it's made hiring difficult. Terrence has struggled to find people that are qualified that will accept the salaries that we're offering.
Just remember, and my experience is that commissioners or members of the boards of trustees or regions are more effective in having discussions with General Assembly member than the paid staff of the organization. And so, we've got to get in the mode of utilizing our commissioners to be effective advocates for what we need to do. There are so many things that are statutory obligation or statutory things that the organization can do, but because of funding, it does not do it. So, rather than continuing to look at ways in which to increase coverage or any of those things, all of those types of action require additional funding to go with it. And so we need to be more effective. And so I want to make certain you all remember to utilize the commissioners in the process, not after the fact, but during the fact and while things are going on, and they're able to do that. So just be aware of that going forward. Okay. Thank you for that, Brandon. Let's move to enforcement, Terrence.
So I did want to say for enforcement, Cynthia isn't able to be here today, but I wanted to, let you all know about the job that enforcement is doing, especially as we're trying to, as it seems like we're always doing, trying to meet our employment EEOC contract now. And there's been just a large push and a lot of work being done by enforcement staff. And I wanted to, share my own appreciation for all that they're doing. They've been asked to do a lot with having little, and the caseload is very heavy. And as Brandon mentioned, it's been hard to find people that are qualified, but also want to take the pay that we can give. I've had 3 really good people that wanted to do the position, but then when they saw what we could pay, were like, absolutely not. But with all that, the enforcement unit is still working hard, closing and reviewing their cases. Cynthia wanted me to also share her thoughts on all the good work that they're doing. And she said she wanted to specifically acknowledge the teamwork and communication efforts that they've been doing recently, and so that it's been nothing short of remarkable. They're all doing a lot of work, more than they've traditionally been tasked to do, but they're helping each other accomplish the goals that they set. And there's also been a lot of strong teamwork exemplified by some of the work that they're doing with the newest member, who is still in the learning phase. But while they may not work in that same area, they're all pitching in to help get that caseload under control as well, and help with support and guidance. And so they are really to be commended for what they've been doing. I don't think that that's said enough, and probably could never be said enough, because they deal with a lot. I know that I've personally driven them nuts the past 2 months for some required case review meetings and asking a lot of questions. And it's all because I do understand that it's very difficult what they're doing, and it takes a lot. And so just wanted to thank them for that. With that, you all have the cases to review, and if you had any questions or wanted to discuss either these or the ones prior, let me know.
So on these cases, we're going to do this in two pieces. One, there were cases that were on the agenda for the June meeting for which we did not have a quorum that we need to approve or reaffirm or ratify action taken by the staff as it relates to those recommendations as one, and then the cases for this meeting. So are there any questions? Joe, you got your hand up?
Yes, there's one case that legal submitted for closure that we need to withdraw. That's 2042H. KCHR Harless versus Pearl Rentals. It's set for settlement, but we still don't have a signature from the complainant. It should be here any day, but we don't quite have it, so it's not quite ready to close.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the staff's recommendation regarding to the cases that were on the agenda for the June 23rd meeting?
And so moved, Chair. And I'd also like to note that because we didn't have a quorum, several of the other commissioners were unable to attend in June, that we did discuss in advance the impact on the HUD reporting. Terrence gave a great explanation of why that could go forward. So just wanted to mention that, and yes, I'd make a motion to approve.
Jim Glenn, second.
Okay, it's been moved and second that the commission approves the staff's recommendation for the cases that were on the June 23rd, 2022 agenda. All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Then that motion is approved. And now we'll move to today, the case on today's August 18th of agenda. And I guess what I would like to is have a motion to approve these cases with the exception of 2042H and 9306E. And the reason for taking 9603E out is it relates to the University of Louisville, U of L Health. And as you all know, I am on the University of Louisville board, so we'll do that separately so I can abstain from the vote. So may I have a motion to approve the cases with those two exceptions? Okay, it's been moved. There's a second.
moved.
Seconded.
It's second. Okay. All those in favor of that motion, by saying aye or raise your hand. Those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Now I'd like to have a motion to approve case 9306E.
Motion.
Okay, is there a second? There's a second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention. And note for the minutes that I abstained from voting on that particular case. Anything else from enforcement unit?
That is all. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move to education and outreach. Mary Ann.
Good morning. You all have the report. I would like to also compliment my team because we've been really sticking with the whole intake process and managing to get some education and outreach in there as well at the same time. Juan does continue to make commission meetings locally in Shelbyville and to constantly do presentations to Spanish-speaking communities about their rights and responsibilities. So I'd like to congratulate him. John Fisher as well is still able to meet with Covington partners, as you can see from the report, making sure that our name is still out there and that we have a strong presence in Northern Kentucky. So I just wanted to compliment them as well as Glenda, who handles the lion's share of all the intake activities that we engage in. So with that said, if you have any questions, I'm here and ready to answer them if possible. That's great.
Any questions from any of the commissioners? Okay, hearing none. Thank you for that. We'll now move to the legal unit report. Joe?
Good morning, everybody. A lot of stuff going on in legal lately. First thing I want to note is that in our unit report, we have a lot of movement in our cases. Shout out to Colt Sells, our staff attorney, for handling most of this litigation. The cases are moving forward. We are getting settlements. This month we had 4 cases settled. One of those we've just temporarily withdrawn because we're still waiting for the complainant to sign off on it, but all the parties are in agreement as far as we know. And so the cases are coming off the docket. We're also adding new cases to it. We issued a PC charge in a case called Jones versus Bradford Heights. We have mediation in another case that failed, unfortunately, but discovery is moving forward. And we're actually we're aggressive in a couple of the cases. Normally, when you're the plaintiff, you're responding to a motion for summary judgment. But in 2 of our cases, we're actually filing motions for summary judgment because we think the facts are so clear that the complainants should just go ahead and win. So a lot of great movement in our litigation. We're still waiting. We have a hearing officer we're waiting on in a case of religious discrimination. We were supposed to get an order from him a couple months ago, and we're still waiting for that, unfortunately. But cases are moving along very well. Other notes. Terrence mentioned an effort in amicus practice and at the appellate level. One thing when I joined, I realized that the agency had been silent in the courts outside of its own cases for a very long time. And the agency, as hopefully you all know, has a statutory obligation to enforce the KCRA as a state institution, and that voice can be very powerful in the courts. In a recent case a couple of years ago, Chief Justice Minton actually asked what the commission's position was on a question of disability discrimination, and the commission was not there. The commission had not filed a brief, was not present by counsel. The courts are interested in our position as an agency, but we have not been there to talk. So I'm trying to change that. In the first step, we filed just at the end of last week as our first amicus brief in 10 years. We have filed in the case of Joyce Turner versus Norton Healthcare, which is a case involving a cancer patient who worked as a nurse at Norton and was harassed and terminated by her supervisors. And I don't say allegedly because a jury determined that she was harassed because of her disability, and they awarded her $1 million. The Court of Appeals, unfortunately, the Kentucky Court of Appeals took that verdict away and said, actually, cancer is not a disability under the Kentucky Civil Rights Act, which is in direct conflict with the ADA. The ADA says cancer is absolutely a disability. And the Kentucky Court of Appeals said, no, actually, we have the old version still. And so, Ms. Turner, you're out of luck. We filed a brief at the Kentucky Supreme Court arguing, obviously, as the Kentucky Civil Rights Act commands, the ADA and the KCRA are the same when it comes to disability discrimination. So we filed our limit 15 pages and walked the court through the history of the courts messing this up in Kentucky and advise them on how the ADA is supposed to work and how the KCRA is supposed to respond to the ADA. So hopefully they're receptive to it. If nothing else, it provides an additional voice, an institutional voice that the court can turn to for some guidance and reassurance that actually it's okay to find cancer to be a disability and it's okay to protect people from discrimination. We don't actually have to turn them away and essentially negate the whole point of the Kentucky Civil Rights Act. So we filed that brief. We have another case that we've identified as being important, and that's Payne versus Aggregate Processing, which is currently in the Court of Appeals. It's a disability claim and an age discrimination claim. We believe the Bullitt Circuit Court, which dismissed the case in summary judgment, we think they got it really wrong in how they both applied disability discrimination law and age discrimination law. So we're planning on filing an amicus brief. We are, as of today, it is possible that we'll actually move to intervene in this case as a party. The circuit rules allow agencies that interpret and enforce statutes to intervene in cases where that statute is an issue.
We explain what that means.
Huh?
We explain what that means.
Yeah, intervention is we jump in as a party, right? It's a private lawsuit filed by people that did not go through the commission to file their complaint. They just found an attorney and sued on their own. And an intervention motion is says that we want to be a party to this case. Add us to the caption. Instead of just being Payne versus aggregate processing, it would be Payne and the commission versus aggregate processing. And the purpose of intervening, rather than just filing an amicus brief, is to, one, get a longer brief. We can file 50 pages instead of 15. And also have a shot at oral argument. And that's, I think, in federal courts, often the federal government gets to argue alongside whichever party they're in support of. And it provides, again, that institutional government perspective on administrative process, a statutory interpretation. And it's an opportunity, perhaps, and I'm waiting for the plaintiff's attorney to sign off on it, because I don't want to move to intervene if they think it would interfere with their case. But if we have the plaintiff's blessing to intervene and join them, then I think it might be worthwhile. Now, the court doesn't have to grant our motion. It's permissive. They can say no, and we still can file an amicus brief, which we intend to do if we don't intervene. But again, it gives us an opportunity to be in the court and giving that institutional perspective that has been completely silent for a very long time. So again, it's a strategy question that we may move forward with, but ultimately we're going to have a voice in this case regardless, and hopefully it'll be useful to the court. I try the quality of the briefing out of this office. I expect to be very high and very helpful, and so we are going to try to assist the court in figuring out how these laws are supposed to work to the benefit of ultimately both parties. Right? We want the process to be fair, both to complainants and defendants, but not to dismiss claims that are otherwise meritorious. Simply because the rule's been misinterpreted. So that's our amicus and appellate effort that we're engaging. One other note, I have sent an offer to the counsel for Joyce Turner. That's the first case we filed a brief in, asking that, he'll have oral argument coming up in the Supreme Court in a couple months. And I would like the commission to host a moot to help him practice and prepare for that case. And I can bring other civil rights attorneys in the state together to help him practice. And 7 of us will pretend to be the Supreme Court, and we'll pepper him with questions that we anticipate he will hear to help to make sure that the advocacy for the Civil Rights Act is as strong as it possibly can be going into the Supreme Court. So that's mooting oral arguments is something I did in my private practice, and it was a huge benefit as an advocate to essentially do a dry run of your argument and get fully prepared. So counsel for Joyce Turner, Jeremiah Reese, expressed great excitement at the idea. So we're going to be looking to coordinate that. And I am moonlighting as an instructor for the law school currently, the University of Louisville Law School. So I think I have an inside approach to getting the courtroom on campus to use for the moot. So we're gonna see what we can do. But I'd like the commission to play a much more active role in private lawsuits as well, because we're all filing suit under the same statute, and the institutional voice can be very helpful, I hope. I mean, if I had the EEOC or the commission behind me in a lot of my private practice, maybe the cases would have gone better sometimes. So we'll see what we can do. Another note, let's see, again, cases are moving forward. We've got some cases we are closing off our docket. Just a shout out to Colt Sells again for all his hard work in litigation and his ability to twist some arms and get settlements out of respondents that have not always been cooperative. Also, shout out to Sana Abari for her work in mediations, and thanks to Sandra Grace, our legal secretary, for all of her diligence in getting our standard operating procedures in line with what we actually do and what we need to do, and her daily work, heavy workload, managing all our cases and making sure everything's filed correctly. So that's it. You have everything else in my report. If you have any questions, let me know.
Any questions for Joe from any commissioner? Joe, you're reaching out to other civil rights attorneys in the state. This brings to mind, there is not a civil rights bar or practice group or
Yeah, I'm sorry. The
that-
closest thing we have is the Kentucky Justice Association, but it's mostly personal injury attorneys.
right. So I'm just thinking in terms of civil rights laws, whether it's at the federal level or state level, a practice group in a practice group in the state, as well as a directory of individuals who practice in those areas across the state.
Yeah,
It'd
we could use it.
Yeah, I'm with those 3 interns that you have this year. Maybe they could work on putting together something like or collecting data and information. It may be easier now because we can do it electronically, but I think it would be well worth having that. Not that we're going to send people to any particular one, but in terms of making that directory available would be a great thing that we could do pretty
Right,
easily.
yeah, like a referral list, right? And I have my own personal network of folks I know who do this line of work, but I don't know everybody. And what we're trying to do as I scrape the dockets, the appellate dockets, looking for cases that we might have an interest in, I'm making sure to note who the attorneys are that represent the plaintiffs, and I'm reaching out to them. I'm making phone calls and emails, just say, hey, look, the commission, if you ever have a case like this, the commission may have an interest in it. And if you need any guidance on how these laws are supposed to work, we're the final word under the statute. So other than the courts. So, reach out to us and we're here to help. And a lot of attorneys are expressing great excitement at having that assistance, but also surprise because some of them didn't know we existed. So that outreach is working. As far as a formal practice group, that sounds fantastic. And the commission may be able to, technically we represent everybody. We can't take sides, but
Right.
Obviously in court, we function as the plaintiff in a civil rights complaint. And so, but yeah, and building that network can be really useful and will help folks who, if we can't find probable cause, or if they don't want to go through us, we may be able to point them in the right direction.
Yeah. No, I just think having something like it would be invaluable, something we need to look at.
I agree.
Any other questions for Jim? Okay.
Thank you.
We have no committee reports. So is there any new business to come before the body?
Yes. Two things. The first one a little lighter than the second. I have tried to be a community engaged person, and I have served on many boards and committees with professors and doctors and senators. And I think this is my first time ever serving on a committee with a Grammy winner. So I just want to recognize that we have greatness among us. Divine, congratulations. One of our commissioners is officially a Grammy winner now.
As well, actually an Emmy.
Emmy winner.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The Grammy is coming.
Grammy's next. Yeah,
Still
I'm sorry.
humbling. Yeah, still humbling though.
I'm giving next year's speech now. I'm sorry, an Emmy winner and next year.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. God is good. We were just trying to make something that uplifted people in some really tough times back in 2020, and we just happened to be recognized for it. So I appreciate that, my brother. That wasn't what we set out to do, but hey, whenever you do good quality work, sometimes it gets recognized. And so I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
Very well deserved. The second is a little less joyful. Legal just spoke about our commission standing up in places that we should be, but we haven't as of late. An issue I have been hesitant to bring before the commission because it's a little outside our purview, but it's gotten to a point that I no longer feel morally I can ignore it. We have had here in Kentucky a plethora of anti-Semitic incidents, specifically in public facing in the last year. From the attempted assassination of Craig Greenberg in January to public officials in Frankfurt. One wrote an amendment that said this law applies to everyone but the Jews. There was two members of the legislative who used the term Jew 'em down, and another one who made a speech about the Jewish view on abortion. And then during the primary election, there was someone that ran a wildly anti-Semitic campaign ad aimed at a Jewish candidate. And when the Jewish candidate spoke out against it, the Courier Journal published an op-ed saying that Jewish people fake anti-Semitic attacks and cry wolf. This is after they published an op-ed in March that they had to pull back for anti-Semitism. They eventually edited the article and said that, we made a mistake. And then just in the last few weeks, we've had a person running for state rep engaged in Holocaust denial, and a local party tweet out that Jews control the government and were the ones who put in a new ATF head. And I think that as we're becoming more public facing, which is something I think we should be doing, there comes a time where we have to speak out on this issue. And I think there are too many strikes that have gone on. Just last week, a Jewish leader in Louisville had their house vandalized with Nazi symbols outside. Is getting to a point that it can't be ignored by our commission any longer. 2 years ago, when we had violent incidents in Kentucky, the commission was a co-sponsor for a rally in Lexington to speak out against it. Since then, I don't think our commission has spoken out on anti-Semitism. No, I'm sorry, we spoke out last Hanukkah when there was a violent attack. But I think that, especially in light of this, most specifically the issue with the election, with the anti-Semitic ad and the op-ed that followed, I think it is crucial that the commission's voice be heard on these issues.
You have any specific suggestions of things that we can do and should do?
Number one is a public statement. I think a op-ed by Terrence in the Courier Journal wouldn't be a bad idea on the subject, and I'd be happy to help with that. If the commission wanted me as a commissioner to write it instead, because it's extremely personal to me, I'd be willing to do that too, but just some way that the commission could speak out and say to the Jewish community that we recognize this. I spoke to the community leader whose home was vandalized 2 weeks ago, and he spoke to the police about it, but there was I asked, did you reach out to any local or national organization that deals with this? And he said, who would I reach out to? There isn't anyone to reach out to. And I think that that's just tragic, that you can have someone from a minority community who has a hate crime happen at their house, and they don't think there's a group that cares about that in the Commonwealth. And I think it's within our mandate to be concerned about that.
That last one.
Picture myself as being pretty well informed. Did not know about the incident 2 weeks ago here in Louisville. Did the media pick it up?
It was reported to the media. I don't know. I didn't see any media stories about it, but I was in Eastern Kentucky that whole week doing flood relief, and I missed a lot of information that week.
No, I guess what I would first of all ask is, I don't think there's any issue with the commission taking the stand and speaking out on this issue, because it's anti-Semitic activity as it relates to the Jewish community, but it's also racist in other ways as it relates to the Black community in terms of what's taking place in this country. And, we have a position to take and a place to stand. So if you would pin what you would think you ought to issue in terms of a statement, and circulate that to Terrence, and Terrence circulate to the rest of us, collectively we'll go and unless there's an objection from somebody, the commission will issue a statement to the media as it relates to this. As it relates to the bigger issue in terms of us being more responsive and more timely in terms of things that we need to do. We're not always as in tune with things as they happen and able to do that. So we really need sort of better and more effective communication among us as things, so that we're in a position to get the commission together to issue a statement or to do some things along those lines. This all goes back to you look at the statutory authority for this organization in terms of what it's supposed to do. It has far-ranging reach and effect if, in fact, it could implement those things. We have drawn back some because of staff, as I said, went from 28 people down to 19 has hindered us, but it shouldn't stop us from being more proactive than currently are. And so now I personally am also all in favor of that, and we want to do more and want to be more reactive and more timely in terms of doing things as opposed to waiting well after the fact. And I'm a little surprised that the local media on the vandalism to a citizen of this community's home that is obviously racial motivated was more said and done. So, I think it's a space in which we got to act. Commissioner Smith?
I want to add to what you're saying, Chair, that we have the news clipping feature in our books, but I do think that when that same built-in piece that we have, maybe we need some more immediate email out to us on these things, because in reading through some of these articles, we see there's a lot to be done. And maybe we could trigger a little bit better just using that feature ahead of waiting on the publication of the monthly book. But I agree wholeheartedly. And I think that to your point, Chair, earlier, there's work that our staff can do, but maybe we should think about, Rabbi, among the commissioners, that there can also be a strategy or work such as what Chair Burr said earlier, that we as commissioners, we have our legal unit, we have our staff, the enforcement unit, we have our executive director, but along the way, it doesn't hurt for the commissioners to have a press conference and say, that we've noticed this, or just to give some visibility to these types of issues when they come up. And it can be just a press conference or an event, but it may do a world of good to let somebody know that we are here and that we as commissioners are not afraid to speak up and speak out on such matters. And I do want to say that carefully, and we need advisement on any legal aspects probably before we would step out and do anything, or is there some kind of a consensus we should come to among us before that would happen? But it's just a suggestion. And such outright things as what you have pointed out, to me, it's a no-brainer that we should be poised and ready to not only write a statement, but to visualize in some way that work that we do as a commission.
So for myself, I can make a commitment to try to be more vocal with the commissioners and Director Sullivan about issues as they come up. I also serve on the Kentucky Jewish Council, which is the most prominent voice for the Jewish community here in the Commonwealth. So number one, they often tweet and speak out when these issues happen, but I can try to keep the board and Director Sullivan aware of these issues as if and as they happen in the community. And secondly, Just the reason I bring this up is the Lubavitcher Rebbe Nachman Schneerson, the foremost Jewish leader of the modern era, famously said that the role of the American government, this is someone who was born in Soviet Russia, fled through Nazi Germany and Vichy France before coming to America, and the vast majority of his family was murdered in Europe. And someone who worked very hard. When we had the report earlier, there's a picture of Shirley Chisholm behind, I don't remember who had the picture behind them. Mary Ann. When I always smile when I see Shirley's picture. They actually worked together very closely on WIC when Shirley Chisholm first brought that idea forward. She worked very closely with Lubavitcher Rebbe on that. But he said it was the role of the American government to uplift segments of the community and thereby ensure the flourishing of the whole. It's a uniquely American idea that by uplifting segments, we ensure the whole, that we're greater because of our diversity and not despite it. And when more diverse voices are heard and when our community is more united, it benefits everyone in that community. So that's what drove me to speak out today. And I'd be happy to participate in further conversations to see how we can address these things.
Commissioner Cheney.
I'm wondering if we commissioners individually could also be signatories on the op-ed to basically to show strength in numbers and to show the folks that know us that may not otherwise approach anyone to discuss the issue associated with a person and can have those conversations. But I think it's really important to show strength in numbers. I would appreciate an opportunity to be a signatory.
Any other comments or thoughts, suggestions?
I had a couple things I wanted to throw in. One, just in thinking about any of this, I'm happy to work with you directly on anything you want to do, especially regarding the thing that was, I think, about 2 weeks ago now. I did know when I reached out about doing something about it or saying something, but I was advised by the candidate you mentioned to hold off. That was the request, to hold off on us saying anything while they were working with the police. So that was one reason that wasn't, nothing was said in that period. But that was something that I was aware of and wanted to, at minimum, recognize. But whatever we could do, and I'm happy to work with you on anything that you want to do regarding any of this. And then the second thing, in response to what Commissioner Cheney just said, I don't know if who on here was aware, I am on the advisory council for the Courier. And so if we have something that we want put into the opinion section, we can put it together and then I can get it published. And that could be with everyone who wants to be a signatory. I could just send it in that way and we could get it published pretty quickly. And I can talk to the editor about when, and so we can talk offline about that as well, about how we want to do that and what it looks like. And I can work with you, Rabbi, on how we get that done. But just did want to say, I know as an office, I know internally that we are trying to be very mindful. And I talk to you quite a bit about things as they come up. Sometimes we don't necessarily do a big public piece about it, but we have had conversations, and just wanting everyone to know, like, we do have that commitment and hope that we can work together to show that this is something that we are committed to. And so just inviting others on this to those conversations as well. So we are making sure that we stay in communication about things that are going on.
So I do want to say very clearly that this was not in any way intended to be an indictment of our previous work. Director Sullivan has done more to recognize the Jewish community and try to be a public voice alongside the Jewish community than probably any figure in a similar government organization in my lifetime. And it's very deeply appreciated. So this was suggestions for more things that we could do, but certainly not any kind of condemnation or indignation about previous work, which the community and me personally is very grateful for.
Okay. So we know what's to go forward with. Rabbi, we're expecting that you will pin something together, send it to Terrence. Terrence will distribute it among the rest of the commissioners, and collectively we will put our thoughts into it and come up with something. As I talked about earlier, in terms of timeliness, the sooner the better. In terms of us being able to do something, so we need to work to get that done. Similarly, when as I say, I guess I'm still thought I knew things about what's going on in the community that didn't know about what happened 2 weeks ago. Then I'm even more disappointed that it wasn't made known to all of the commissioners in terms of where it is. But we'll work on that in terms of communication and timeliness in terms of what's going on. Just as we say for the agenda for the meeting, topics that you would like to discuss is important, but also getting that information, getting out to all of the commissioners, things that are happening in the community on which we can be a voice. And we can have some impact is absolutely important and essential. And so that's something we need to work on and will work on. Which gets me down to the next is again, suggest our next meeting is scheduled for September the 15th. Here in Louisville, assuming that we can, in fact, meet in person and we're not in the red category again at that particular point in time. So if anything that you would like to place on the agenda, send that to Terrence. Is there anything else anyone would like to bring up before we adjourn this meeting?
I would like to say earlier on about the 15th, that is the busiest day of my life coming up. It may be possible that I may not be able to attend that morning. I'll do my best, but I did want to. It would help if it would be virtual rather than in person.
Okay. I'll make a note of that, Frank.
And just as an announcement, on that day will be the final day that the National Baptist Convention of America's convention will be going on. But we're also dedicating the old original Central School ribbon cutting on that day at 6th and Kentucky. And that will be at 2 p.m. And you're welcome. All commissioners are welcome to come. And the school was built as the first building in the state to educate Black children. And Simmons now owns that building. And we will have a ribbon cutting. It will also serve as headquarter offices for the National Baptist Convention of America, that we will share some space for them. So we're excited about that day. And I know that's why I wanted to share. I may be detained that morning getting some final details together. Thank you.
Okay. This is Jim Glenn. That's 6th and Kentucky in Louisville, September 15th at 2 p.m.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Built in 1873, still standing.
I'm far too young to be this old, but my memory isn't that great. Do you mind sharing that in an email? Because I'd very much like to be there.
Sure. Yes. Thanks, Rabbi. I'll send it to Terrence to get out to us, but it's a historical day.
Okay. Any other matter anyone has? Okay, hearing none and without objection, the meeting is adjourned. Look forward to being with you or seeing you on September the 15th. So thanks a lot for a very good and informative meeting.